Welcome back to Feeling Good Feels Good. I am your host, Dr. Tripp. This is the podcast where we talk about total wellness and outright wellness. We look at wellness through four major categories: physical health, mental and emotional health, chemical and nutritional health, as well as lifestyle, habit, and environmental health. Today we have a topic that on the surface might look like it's purely physical health, but the more we learn about it, the more it takes a surprising turn, not just into chemical, but really into mental and emotional health as well. This topic was seen as just a tissue, but really it's more like an organ that supports us through sensory and connectiveness. It helps our body sense safety and well-being and connects and communicate responses between different parts of our body. And no, it's not the nervous system, it's fascia. When we learn anatomy, we're taught that things exist in separate parts. Muscles here, bones there, ligaments somewhere else. But fascia doesn't really fit into that model. Fascia is highly connected throughout the entirety of our body. And something that's super interesting about it is that there's really no beginning or end. It's a massive framework that exists throughout the entirety of our body. And the more we learn about it, the more we realize that it really functions like an organ and is highly sensitive. So why does that even matter? Well, it actually impacts our overall health and well-being greatly. Today, we're going to dive deep into what fascia actually is, what it does, where it is, why the more we learn about it, the more interesting it becomes, how it impacts almost everything, not just our physical health, but even our mood and our memory, why it becomes dysfunctional, how to treat it, and how to keep it healthy, and the major benefits that will have for you. So let's get started.
Welcome to Feeling Good Feels Good with Dr. Tripp.
Welcome to a state of feeling good. It's how we live and how you could. Just know it's how we're all meant to be. If things are off, listen to your body. It can tell us exactly what we need. Physical, emotional, nutritional, or mentally. No need to worry, it's reached accessibly. No matter how you felt or what you've heard, well-being's for everyone, it's what you deserve. Ease and joy are yours once it's understood. No need to fear, because feeling good feels good.
The information in this podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only. It is not medical advice and should not be interpreted as a diagnosis, treatment, or prescription. Listening to this podcast does not establish a doctor-patient relationship. Always consult your own healthcare providers before making any changes to your health, medications, or treatment plans. The opinions shared here are based on clinical experience, research, and professional knowledge, but they may not apply to any specific situations. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge and agree to these terms.
Welcome back. I'm so happy you're here. This is going to be a super interesting episode about a topic that I'm not sure why it's discussed so little in a world that seems more and more curious about health and wellness. Why it's not discussed more in the fitness world, in the wellness world, in the psychology and emotional health world. Why it's not talked about more in routine doctor's visits and in physical health settings like chiropractic offices, physical therapy office, and acupuncture offices. But my hope is after today's episode, you won't need to ask so many questions to your providers because you'll just understand for yourself how to keep this healthy and why that can help you so much. Fascia is commonly defined as a continuous connective tissue matrix. If you've never seen fascia, while you're listening to this episode, I would encourage you to just type it into Google Images and see what comes up. It might just look like a spider web or crinkled up plastic wrap or a bunch of threads all tied together. But yes, that is the highly sensitive organ-like tissue that communicates between your entire body and controls so much of our movement and the way we feel and the topic that we are going to discuss today. The most common misconception is that it's just wrapping. It's just a case. It's just something that covers the important stuff in our body. But that massively understates what it does. It really does behave like an organ system. It transmits force. It senses movement. It stores tension and even participates in communication between different parts of our body. In fact, fascia contains more sensory nerve endings than muscle. That's right. There are more sensory nerves in fascia than muscle, meaning the way we feel when we move may actually come more from fascia than the muscles themselves. For a long time, fascia was just cut away during anatomy labs, cut open and peeled to the side to get to the muscles and the nerves and the organs, the important stuff. It was seen just as packaging, just something that covered everything else almost like a case. And it wasn't until relatively recently that researchers began studying fascia and began to understand how dynamic it actually is. The big change in understanding came once we started looking at fascia under imaging while the body is in motion. When seeing fascia under load, tension, stress, or movement, it became very clear that this tissue is not passive at all. It's alive, it's adaptable, it's changing size and shape, and it's deeply involved in the way we move and the way we feel. So what does it actually do? One of the primary roles of fascia is force transmission. When we move, our muscles do not work in isolation. Force is transferred throughout our entire body. To have individual zones of our body absorb 100% of the impact would cause so much repetitive, persistent injury that we would never recover. And fascia helps absorb this force in coordination. It orchestrates how this force is absorbed and where the impact goes to keep us safe. Fascia also supports structure without rigidity, meaning that we don't fall apart, but we're also just not some rigid frame. It helps not only absorb force, but keep the body upright, maintaining shape while allowing flexibility. One of the most fascinating things about fascia is its sensory role. We already talked about how fascia has more sensory nerve endings than muscle. This means that it plays a crucial role in proprioception, our spatial awareness, and balance. So if you are an athlete or somebody who wants to improve the way they move, this episode is going to be highly important and will likely give you an edge on your competition because this is talked about so infrequently. This also means that fascia is deeply involved in how we feel stiffness, tension, or pain. So if you are suffering from pain or you are a provider who treats patients in pain, this is also an essential episode for you to listen to. So fascia is coordinating all of these things right now while you're sitting, walking, or driving. Fascia is coordinating the way you feel, the way you move, and orchestrating what parts of your body are doing what. Doesn't it sound like we're talking about the nervous system a little bit? To me, it does. It's no wonder that fascia has so many nerve endings and is in such close communication with our nervous system. So where does fascia exist in our body? It's broken down into three main layers: superficial, deep, and visceral. The superficial fascia is right under the skin. This helps with movement, fluid flow, and even temperature regulation. There's deep fascia, which surrounds your bones, muscles, joints, and nerves. This is the fascia that helps coordinate bigger movements, like walking, running, or using your arms. And then there's visceral fascia, which supports and suspends the organs. This allows your organs to be safe, to move, to be supported and flexible when we breathe, walk, twist, or do any other movement. What's so important to understand about these layers is that they are not separate. They are continuous. Fascia does not stop at the end of a joint or a muscle. It blends and moves from one area to the next, creating a single connected network throughout the entire body. Again, I feel like I'm talking about the nervous system when I'm talking about fascia. There is literally no separation between the fascia, just different layers of density, thickness, and direction. While muscles start and end on certain bones, fascia has no beginning and no end. It is a continuous loop of highly sensitive and highly functional tissue woven throughout every piece of our body. So if you've had pain in your shoulder, for example, and you and your providers constantly work on the shoulder, work on the shoulder, work on the shoulder, and the pain just comes back, understanding the connectedness of fascia may help you get to the root of the problem. Think about a long web of strings. If you pull on one end of the string, does only that end move? No, the entire web moves. So just because there's pain or restriction in one area of the body does not mean it's the only area that needs to be addressed, to free up movement and release tension. For some listeners, this may feel overwhelming about getting to the bottom of what's going on. But for chronic pain sufferers, hearing this may allow you to feel a little bit lighter, knowing that there's so much of the body to explore and so much opportunity to improve function and decrease tension in different areas of the body. So working through different assessments, different checks, different releases, and different tests in different parts of your body may give you a fresh perspective and real progress in reducing your chronic pain. Thinking about fascia really helps patients and providers understand that movement is more about relationships than individual muscles. And healing becomes about restoring overall function and balance of the whole system, not just one spot. To understand fascia, we need to think about it, yes, as a physical system, but also as a communication system. It doesn't belong to just one system, it links many of them. Think about your nervous system. Fascia is loaded with sensory receptors. This is why fascial restriction can affect balance and hinder coordination and athletic performance. It also plays a major role in pain signaling. In many cases, when people experience muscle pain, it may actually be irritation or oversensitization of the fascia. We've talked about the connection to the musculoskeletal system. It's also deeply connected to our circulation and our lymphatic systems. These fluid systems rely on movement and glide to function properly. And fascia is so essential to movement and glide that it actually helps guide blood flow and lymphatic drainage by creating pathways and pressure changes during movement. Fascia actually clears the way for blood to flow and for lymph and waste to drain out of your body. So when fascia becomes stiff or desensitized, it can affect fluid movement, it can contribute to swelling, blood pressure changes, or even edema or lymph changes. Let's not forget about another system that fascia is intertwined with, your immune system. Fascia contains immune cells and is involved with inflammatory signaling and tissue repair. When tissue is injured or stressed, the fascial network helps coordinate the body's healing response. Wow. So let's review that one more time. Not only does fascia coordinate how our body moves, but it also gives us stability, keeps us upright, communicates heavily, even more heavily than muscles, with our nervous system, creates pathways for our blood to flow and our waste to drain, and even coordinates how our body repairs damaged tissue and how our immune system functions and how we fight off inflammation. Now can you see why at the very least it's at least worth listening to a 20-minute podcast episode about, but really should be a feature in modern medicine and health and wellness everywhere. So before we talk about how fascia becomes dysfunctional and how to treat it and improve it, there's one other important thing to touch on. And this might be the craziest part of all, the connection between fascia, emotion, and experience. So we've already talked about how fascia is deeply innervated by the nervous system, but research over the last 2 decades has shown that fascia contains a high density of interoceptive nerve fibers. What is that? These are sensory receptors that inform the brain about the internal state of the body. These are the same interoceptive pathways that are involved with emotional regulation, stress response, and autonomic nervous system activity. We just did a 2-part episode on the autonomic nervous system. If you thought fascia was crazy, I'd advise you to go back and listen to that 2-part series on autonomic nervous system and how that impacts our day-to-day life without us even realizing that it's happening or going on in the background. So back to fascia. So in other words, it doesn't just sense movement, position, or fluid flow, it senses our internal state. The pathways that communicate tension between our fascia and our brain actually overlap with our emotional processing centers. There's even strong evidence that chronic stress and trauma alter this connective tissue. It's been shown that heightened emotions and chronic stress actually lead to fascial stiffness. They can make your fascia tight. This reduces glide, coordination, and the functionality of all the things we talked about earlier, but it can also lead to heightened sensitivity, meaning that you are more easily triggered and have a decreased ability to respond to stress and emotionally regulate. This is actually a psychological response to prolonged stress and nervous system activity. Because this research is fairly new, there's lots of theories being thrown around, some with more evidence and some with less. So let's just chat about a few. Some practitioners suggest that fascia becomes part of how our body stores patterns, not memories the way the brain does, but habitual responses. The fascia learns ways to respond, so when we encounter anything stressful, we already have patterns in our fascia controlling how we respond. At least that's what some of these practitioners would say. Somatic practitioners suggest that persistent tension patterns are actually emotions or traumas memorized by the body and carried out by the fascia, not because emotions are actually stored in tissue like a hard drive, but because these protective strategies, good or bad, start to become a pattern and become memorized over time. So taking a step back and using the research at hand, we can say that the brain stores the memories, but the fascia may participate in the body's memory or familiarity with stress and safety. Through the fascia's relationship with the nervous system, it may lead us to reflect or re-experience a lived experience, not symbolically, but physiologically. For this component of understanding fascia, it can be approached with less of forcing change, but more about creating new patterns and creating safety and restoring ease and movement. So what does it feel like if your fascia is stiff or dysfunctional? It may be just that, stiffness. Maybe you just feel overall tight and tense without any clear memory of an injury that could have caused it. You may have chronic tension patterns, perhaps reduced range of motion. Maybe there's pain that doesn't follow any specific anatomical structure or typical diagnosis. If you lack variability in your movement, if you go through the same postures over and over and over again, that may be another sign that you have stiffness in your fascia. Not because the fascia causes you to not have a variety of movement, but because the lack of variety of movement causes part of your fascial system to get stiff. The feelings of heaviness or compression may be an indicator. And some of the biggest keys that I see are if somebody has symptoms that become worse with stress, lack of sleep, illness, and poor hydration. Diagnoses like chronic pain syndrome, fibromyalgia, or intense post-surgical pain can all be indicators that treatment of fascia may be beneficial to this person. So when we think about fascial dysfunction, it's not necessarily broken or torn. What's happened is that the fascia has adapted to certain stressors and adopted patterns based on those stressors. Basically, the stress was either frequent enough or a big enough threat that your fascia changed the way that it coordinates how your body works. So a key to improving is not only reducing tension and adaptation, but introducing new patterns, new sensations, and new emotions of freedom, of movement, and of safety. What are some of the common treatments to help with fascia? You may have heard of myofascial release. Now, I hope you have a better understanding of what that word means. Myo means muscle, and fascial obviously means fascia. So releasing the muscle and the fascia, things like active release technique. Chiropractic adjustments are extremely beneficial. Restoring proper joint movement allow the surrounding fascia to reset its tension and movement patterns. Healthy joint movement supports fascial elasticity. Fascia is rich in something called mechanoreceptors. These mechanoreceptors are highly stimulated by chiropractic adjustments. The adjustment done correctly and effectively literally deforms the fascia and removes old problematic patterns through physical movement and neurological signaling. So if you are having these symptoms of fascial pain patterns, finding a good chiropractor may support you greatly. Some of the most common therapies are scraping or gua sha and cupping therapies. You may hear that these break up fascia or break up scar tissue, but what they're really doing is mobilizing the fascia, improving tissue glide, and dramatically increasing circulation. This creates new movement with a big delivery of new nutrients. This gives the fascia an opportunity to break up old patterns and create new ones. So we're not scraping it apart, we're bringing it back to life. Hydration and electrolytes are key to healthy fascia. Fascia relies heavily on hydration. Nutrition plays a key role, of course. Like so many other things we talk about, if you're doing the basic things that you know are good for you, your fascia is probably going to be in good shape. Are you sleeping? Are you eating well? Are you giving yourself nutrients? Are you participating in mindfulness activities like breathing and meditation? For fascia specifically, protein and adequate vitamin C are very essential. These help support connective tissue, tissue repair, and tissue elasticity, the superpowers of fascia. So hydration, protein, vitamin C, and even minerals will help keep your fascia healthy. Due to the deep connection between fascia and our emotional state, participating in emotional regulation and mindfulness activities like meditation, like yoga, and like journaling will keep your physical body healthy and keep your fascia healthy. Remember how many systems coordinate between our fascia? So the next time you think meditation may not be important, think about everything we talked about today and how this is just one of the ways that participating in breathwork and mindfulness can support your well-being. Being mindful of varying your movements, having good and different postures, as well as adequate sleep, decreasing processed foods, and increasing anti-inflammatory foods will decrease the load on your fascia. So next time you feel tight, bogged down, overall tense, I hope you can remember some of the techniques that we talked about, and with understanding the benefit, you can actually feel the benefit at a greater level too. I can't wait to see you all next time on our next episode of Feeling Good Feels Good.